Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to chapter 18, and today we're looking at Waw correlative and Waw consecutive. Waw correlative and Waw consecutive. Let's get started. Let me remind you of what we looked at in the past. So far we've looked at two tenses. We've looked at the perfect tense and the imperfect tense. And when we looked at the perfect tense, we said that the perfect tense is used to show completed action. And because it's completed action, it's normally translated as a past tense. And when we come to the imperfect tense shows incomplete action. And because it's incomplete, it's normally translated as a present tense or future tense. But then there's something that is very strange in Hebrew. And this is not found in English. This is very strange to English speakers, but in biblical Hebrew it's common. Now before I say it, let me remind you of something that we looked at. Remember, the Waw conjunction is used to say and. When you want to say and he killed, and he made, and he walked. The word and is Waw conjunction in Hebrew. But strangely in biblical Hebrew, in some portions of scripture, if we write the letter Waw at the beginning of the verb is going to change from past tense to future tense. And in other places it's going to change from future tense to past tense. I want to repeat, strangely in biblical Hebrew, in some portions of the Hebrew Bible, if we write the letter Waw at the beginning of the verb is going to change from past tense to future tense. And if it's a future tense, it's going to change from future to past tense. So strangely in biblical Hebrew, if you put the letter Waw on a perfect verb, instead of translating it as a past tense, you're going to translate it as a future tense. It's going to act as a future action. And strangely again, when you add the letter Waw and attach it to an imperfect verb, instead of translating the imperfect tense as a future tense, the imperfect tense is going to act or function like a past tense. And so this is what we want to look at today, Waw correlative and Waw consecutive. So let's get started. Let's start by looking at the Waw correlative. The Waw correlative. Again, let me remind you. You remember that the perfect tense shows completed action, and hence is translated as past tense. But when the letter Waw is added to a perfect verb, the perfect verb is going to turn from being past action to future action, from being past tense to future tense. And I want to repeat that because this is Waw correlative. Waw correlative is this. When you add Waw to a perfect verb, that perfect verb is going to be converted from being a past action, past tense, to being a future tense. And the Waw correlative, or this is very common to find in prophetic books. This scenario that is called Waw correlative is very common to find in prophetic books. So let me make things simple. Let me say it in other words. In biblical Hebrew, if you want to say what will happen in the future, Hebrew uses perfect tense plus Waw. Let me say it again. If you want to talk about things, events that will happen in the future, Hebrew is going to use a perfect tense, perfect verbs with Waw added to it to show or describe things that will happen in the future. Normally, the perfect verb shows actions that happened in the past. But in biblical Hebrew, strangely, if you want to say or show things that will happen in the future, biblical Hebrew uses perfect verb with Waw. And when you see the perfect verb with Waw added to it, that will convert the perfect verb into future tense. Again, as I say, this is very common to find in prophetic books. Alright, let's look at examples of Waw correlative. We have the first one there. We'amah paro. We'amah paro. Now, We'amah paro is translated as, and Pharaoh will say. And Pharaoh will say. That line will say, that part will say is coming from We'amah. And We'amah has two things. You have Amah. Amah is a perfect verb, and you have Waw conjunction. Amah normally is supposed to be translated as past action, past tense. Amah. Amah means he said. In the past, he said. So Amah was supposed to be translated as a past tense, he said. But here is translated as will say. Instead of saying he said, here it's will say. Pharaoh will say in the future. Why? Because of this Waw that is added. When you're describing events that will happen in the future, when you add Waw to a perfect verb, the perfect verb will not be translated as a past action, but will point to a future tense. It will be used as a future tense. And this is what we're saying here. We'amah, instead of saying and he said, the translation becomes and Pharaoh will say. And Pharaoh will say. Alright, let's look at the next one. You have We'avdu et Yahweh. We'avdu et Yahweh. And the translation for this is, but they will serve the Lord. But they will serve the Lord. The phrase will serve is coming from the verb, the first word, we'avdu. We'avdu is the one that is having the translation, will serve. They will serve. Now, we'avdu is a perfect verb. Avdu is a perfect verb. But then because of this word that is added to it, instead of translating this perfect verb as a past tense, the translation is going to be future. But they will serve the Lord. But they will serve the Lord. This is waw correlative here. This word that is added to the perfect verb is making us translate this perfect verb as a future action. And then we have the last one. Yimsho hamelech umalach. Yimsho hamelech umalach. And here the translation for this is, the king will rule and will reign. The king will rule and will reign. Focus on the one that is highlighted, umalach. Umalach has two things. You have waw conjunction, which is pointed as shurek, and you know the conjunction before labios is pointed as shurek. And then you have the verb malach. Malach is a perfect verb. You have the verb malach, and that is a perfect verb. Malach means he ruled. He ruled. It's in the past. It's a perfect verb, and so the translation normally is supposed to be as a past. He ruled. But here the translation is, we will reign. Why? Because of this waw conjunction. Alright, what are we saying here? What is waw correlative? Waw correlative is a situation in Hebrew, a scenario where you have waw added to a perfect verb, and because of this, the perfect verb is not going to be translated as a past, as a normal past tense. This is going to convert the perfect tense as a future tense. And so the perfect verb is going to point to a future tense instead of a past tense. Now you may be wondering, how am I going to know this? How am I going to know that this is pointing to a future action? And the answer is this. Context is going to guide you. Context is going to let you know that the events that are being talked about are future events. And in that case, you're going to see the perfect tense being used and waw being added to the perfect verbs. So context is going to guide you in knowing waw correlatives. And when you see them, you're going to see waw conjunction plus perfect verbs. And the action is not going to be past, the action is going to be future, because this will convert the perfect verbs into pointing to future tense, into being future tense. Remember, this is mostly used in prophetic books. When you want to show things that will happen in the future, Hebrew is going to use waw correlative. I want to repeat. When Hebrew wants to show things that will happen in the future, Hebrew then is going to use waw correlative. Waw plus perfect verb. That is called waw correlative. Still on the waw correlative, let's look at more examples. The first phrase is We'amru ishto zot. We'amru ishto zot. And that has a translation, and they will say, this is his wife. And they will say, this is his wife. That phrase, they will say, is coming from the verb amru. We'amru. Again, you have a perfect verb. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know that this is perfect verb? Remember, when you're looking at the perfect verbs, we said perfect verbs have no prefixes. The imperfect verb is the one that is having prefixes. And as you can see, all the examples that are here are perfect verbs. And they have no prefixes. They have no prefix. So this is telling you that the words you're looking at are perfect verbs. And so amru is a perfect verb and is having the waw conjunction. And because of this waw conjunction, this is not pointing to a past action, but a future action. And that is why, though this is a perfect verb, amru normally is supposed to be translated as they said, but here the translation is they will say, future, because of the waw conjunction. So the waw conjunction is going to convert the perfect verb into a future action, a future tense. Let's look at the second example. We'amati lelo ami ata. We'amati lelo ami ata. And this is translated as, and I will say to not my people. I will say to those that are not my people, you are my people. And I will say to not my people, you are my people. But let's focus on the word we'amati. We'amati. Now, we'amati is the one that is being translated as I will say. But we'amati is a perfect verb. Normally, the translation was supposed to be I said and I said. But because of this while conjunction, this perfect is being translated as a future. And I will say. Why? Because we're talking about the events being described are future events. And in Biblical Hebrew, when you're referring to future events, Biblical Hebrew is going to use the perfect verb in describing a future action. And this is called Waw correlative. So where mati, instead of being I said, becomes and I will say. To not my people, you are my people. Remember, lelo, lo means not, ami means my people. So, lelo ami, to not my people. Ami ata, my people, ami, my people, you are. You are my people. And so where mati is going to be I will say. I will say. Last example there you have Amanu haya ra akhalatu. Ra akhalatu. The translation for that is we shall say a wood beast has devoured him. We shall say a wood beast has devoured him. As you can see, context is showing that the events being described are future, and because of that, Hebrew is going to use a perfect verb in describing a future action. Instead of using the imperfect verb, it's going to use a perfect verb in describing a future action. And this is Waw correlative. Remember, Waw correlative only happens on perfect verbs. Waw correlative only happens on perfect verbs. Alright, let's move on. Let's look at the Waw consecutive. Let's look at the Waw consecutive. Again, in some places, when you add Waw to an imperfect verb, the Waw is going to reverse the imperfect verb from showing a future action into showing a past action. Waw consecutive is when you have Waw added to an imperfect verb. And because you have Waw added to an imperfect verb, the Waw is going to convert the imperfect verb from pointing into a future action, because normally an imperfect verb shows a future action. But when you add the Waw conjunction, instead of showing a future action, it's going to show a past action. And that is called Waw consecutive. Now, the Waw consecutive is mostly used in narratives. When you're narrating things that happened in the past, the Waw consecutive is going to be used. And so this is very common in narratives. In Bible books that are narratives, you're going to see it a lot in narratives, where you're telling things that happened in the past. So in Biblical Hebrew, when you want to show things that happened in the past, you're going to use the imperfect verb. And the imperfect verb normally points to things that happen in the future. But in Biblical Hebrew, when you want to show things that happened in the past, you're going to use the imperfect verb with Waw conjunction. And as I said, this is mostly used in narratives. This is mostly used in narratives. Now you may be wondering, how am I going to know that this is Waw conjunction? Luckily, the Waw conjunction has a key, has an identity, has a form. To show that it's Waw conjunction, you're going to see it having the letter Waw with a patach. Remember, Waw conjunction is normally pointed with the letter Waw with a shiwa, but when it's used as a Waw consecutive, it's going to be pointed as the letter Waw with a patach. So it's going to be Waw with a patach plus an imperfect verb. I want to repeat, the Waw consecutive as a key has an identity, because it's going to have Waw, the letter Waw with a patach, and then it's going to have an imperfect. It's going to be attached to the imperfect verb. And when you see this kind of a combination, it's telling you that translate the imperfect verb not as a future tense, but as a past tense. Alright, let's look at examples. The first one we have Wayomer Yahweh El Moshe. Wayomer Yahweh El Moshe. And this is translated as, and Yahweh said to Moses. And Yahweh said to Moses. That word that is being translated as said is Wayomer. Said is Wayomer. Now, Wayomer is imperfect. Remember, imperfect verbs have prefixes. As you can see, all the examples that are highlighted are imperfect because they have prefixes. And so Wayomer is imperfect. It's coming from the verb amar. Amar means he said. And so normally this was supposed to be translated as he will say. He will say. But instead of pointing to a future, because of this Waw consecutive, because of this Waw, Wayomer is being translated as he said. And Yahweh said to Moses. And Yahweh said to Moses, because we're pointing to things that happened in the past. We're narrating things that happened in the past. And when you're narrating things that happened in the past, Hebrew is going to use the imperfect verb plus Waw consecutive. It's going to use the imperfect verb plus Waw consecutive or Waw conjunction. So here the translation is, and Yahweh said to Moses. Next phrase we have, Watomeri lo evo. Watomeri lo evo. And this is being translated as, and you said, I will not transgress. And you said, I will not transgress. This part that is being translated as, you said, is coming from the verb watomeri. Watomeri. This is an imperfect verb. So here you have imperfect verb plus waw conjunction. And so as you can see, watomeri is having the waw patach, and then you have an imperfect. And so this is waw consecutive. And so watomeri means, and you said. Instead of saying, and you say, the translation becomes, and you said, because it's waw consecutive. Next you have the phrase, Waoma el Adoni. Waoma el Adoni. And the translation for this is, and I say to my master. And I say to my master. El Adoni. Adoni means my master. El means to. I said to my master. Ama means I said. But normally it was supposed to be translated as I will say. But because we have waw consecutive, it's going to reverse it to the past. It's going to be I said. Instead of saying I will say, it's going to be I said. I said to my master. And I said to my master. So again, this is waw consecutive. Now you may be wondering, why isn't it waw patach? Why is it waw kametz? It's kametz because when waw is in front of gutturals, the patach is going to be lengthened into a kametz. So you're going to have waw kametz instead of waw patach. And waoma means I said. I said. Instead of saying I'll say, you're going to say I said. I said to my master. Last example is Watomana hazod Naami. Watomana hazod Naami. Translation for this is, and they said, is this Naomi? And they said, is this Naomi? The part for they said is a translation of the first word, and that is Watomana. It's having the waw consecutive, and because of this waw consecutive, the verb is being converted from being a future tense into being a past tense. So instead of translating this as they will say, you're going to say they said. They said. Now you may be wondering, how am I going to really know that the word I'm looking at is a waw consecutive? Here's the most important key. You're going to see, number one, you're going to see the letter waw. And the letter waw will be pointed with waw, the letter waw with the patach. It's going to be waw with the patach. And here's the most important thing. The first letter of the verb is going to be pointed with a dagesh forte. So you're going to have waw, the letter waw, patach, dagesh forte, then imperfect verb. Again, you're going to have waw, patach, dagesh forte, and imperfect verb. For example, in the first word, we have wayomer. First of all, you have waw, patach, and then you have dagesh in the yod. So you have waw, the letter waw, patach, and dagesh in the letter yod. In the next example, you have watomeri. Watomeri, you're having waw, patach, and in the tau, you can see there's dagesh there. And that is telling you that the word you are looking at is a waw consecutive. In the next one, you have waoma. Waoma. Again, you have waw. Kametz, instead of having patach, the patach has been lengthened into a kametz. But then the next letter is aleph, and aleph is a guttural. And that is why you're not seeing the dagesh, because gutturals reject the dagesh forte. But in the last example there, you have watomana, you're having the letter waw, patach, and in the tau, you're seeing the dagesh forte there. So here's the most important thing. When it's waw consecutive, it's going to have waw, patach, and imperfect verb. And in the first letter of the imperfect verb, you're going to see dagesh forte there. When you see that, the word you're looking at is a waw consecutive. And instead of translating it as a future tense, it's going to be translated as a past tense because it's waw consecutive. Remember, in biblical Hebrew, when you're narrating, when you're talking about things that happened in the past, Hebrew is going to use an imperfect verb with waw conjunction, and the imperfect verb is going to point. Instead of pointing to a future tense, it's going to point to a past tense. That is what we call waw consecutive. And remember, this is mostly common in narratives, in Bible books that are telling stories that are narrating things that happened in the past. And this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And so the waw consecutive is going to be used most of the times in the narratives. Alright, let's look at the summary of what we looked at. There are two tenses. We have perfect tense and imperfect tense. The perfect tense normally shows a completed action, and because the action is completed, it's normally translated as a past tense. But when it's part of Waw correlative, it's going to be used as a future tense. And then we have the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense shows an incomplete action, and because the action is incomplete, it's normally translated as a present tense or future tense. But when it's part of Waw consecutive, the imperfect tense is going to be used as a past tense. It's going to point to a past action. And so remember, we have Waw correlative, and Waw correlative is used on perfect verbs pointing to future action. And then we have Waw consecutive, and Waw consecutive is used on imperfect verbs pointing to past action. And so it's the opposite. Waw correlative, perfect verbs, future action. Waw consecutive, imperfect verbs, past action. Waw correlative and Waw consecutive. That's very, very important to know. Remember, Waw correlative is mostly used in prophetic books pointing to future action or future events. And Waw consecutive is mostly used in narratives, narrating things that happened in the past. That's very important to know. Alright, let's look at chapter 18 vocabulary. Let's look at words that you need to know for chapter 18. And we're starting with the nouns. The first one is hevel. Hevel. Hevel means breath. Hevel means breath of vanity or idol. Hevel means breath of vanity. Next we have the word chema. Chema. Chema means heat or wrath. Chema means heat or wrath. Next we have the word neorim. Neorim. Neorim means time of youth. Neorim means time of youth. Remember, this is coming from Na'ar. Na'ar means a lad, a youth. So Neorim means time of youth. Next we have Ammon. Ammon. Ammon means Ammon, or it means Ammonite. It means Ammon or Ammonites. Next we have the word Pa'am. Pa'am. Pa'am means step or pace. It means step or pace. Next we have Perat. Perat. Perat means Euphrates. Perat means Euphrates. Still on the nouns, next we have Tsar. Tsar. Tsar means enemy. Tsar means enemy. Next we have Rechem. Rechem. Rechem means womb. Rechem means womb. The womb is thought as a symbol of tender care or mercy or compassion. And because of that, just as a mother feels protective love for what is inside her womb, Hebrew language also uses the same root to describe God's compassion or God's mercy or parental care. And so the word rechem sometimes is used to show God's compassion or mercy, how God protects or shows mercy to his own people. So the word rechem means womb, but sometimes means compassion or mercy. God's compassion or mercy. Rechem, meaning womb. Next we have the word shemen. Shemen. Shemen means oil or it means fat. Shemen means oil or fat. Next we have sheker. Sheker. Sheker means lie. Sheker means lie. Breach of faith or deception. Sheker means deception or lie. Then we come to the verbs, and we have the first one, bachar. Bachar. And bachar means he wept. It means he wept. Next we have the word gala. Gala. Gala means he revealed or uncovered. He revealed or uncovered. Next we have the word yacho. Yacho. Yacho means he was able. He prevailed or he was able. Next we have the word kaved. Kaved. Kaved means he was heavy. Kaved means he was heavy. Next we have the word tzara. Tzara. Tzara means he attacked. Tzara means he attacked. Next we have the word katon. Katon. Katon means he was small. He was small. And then we have adjectives. On the adjectives we have one there, and that is the word katan. Katan. Katan means small, insignificant, unimportant. Katan means small or insignificant or unimportant. And this is a very important word that you find, especially when you're reading 1 Samuel 16, the story of David and Samuel, where God sends Samuel to go and anoint a king, Israel's king, in Jesse's house. And the Bible says that when Samuel goes in Jesse's house, Jesse lines up all his children or his sons, and Samuel goes through them one by one until all of them are done. And Samuel asks Jesse a question, a very important question. Samuel says, "Are these all your sons? Are these all your sons?" And Jesse answers using this word. Jesse says, "There yet remains the youngest. There yet remains the youngest." And the word youngest there, the word that is being used, youngest, is the adjective katan. But in the English, the translation is youngest. But actually in the Hebrew, it's katan. And katan means small, insignificant, unimportant. And so Jesse is saying, there yet remains one who is small, one who is insignificant, one who is unimportant. And Jesse is saying, the ones that have lined up are those that are huge, are those that are significant, are those that are important. But then there still remains one that is small, insignificant, unimportant. Yet we find grace because the one who is small, the one who is insignificant, the one who is unimportant, is the one who was crowned king. So Hebrew is very interesting. Hebrew is going to uncover things that are hidden underneath the text. So the word that is being translated as youngest there in the Bible is the adjective katan. Katan means small, it means insignificant, it means unimportant. And that is very important when you're preaching or doing exegesis. And this is why we learn Hebrew. So katan means small, insignificant, unimportant. Then we come to prepositions, and we have one there, levad. We have the word levad. Levad means except, apart from, or beside. Levad means except, apart from, or beside. And then we have conjunctions, and we have one there. We have the word ya'an. Ya'an. Ya'an means because or because of. Ya'an means because or because of. Alright, this marks the end of chapter 18. Remember, practice, practice, practice. Later out.